Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live Q&A here with Mark and Alicia. We're talking all about Canada immigration, and yeah, we are pretty stoked here to be back at her. I was away last week. We had a conflict. Let's see, what was I doing last week? Oh, I was doing a presentation. Let's see, what was I doing? I remember the Canadian Immigration Lawyer Association. I was doing a presentation to them on the golden age of the Francophone immigrant. So back here and excited to be here. And I think Igor was away as well, so we weren't able to do the live stream. So it's great to be here with all of you that are tuning in from all over. As always, we really like to see where you guys are listening from. So please post in the comments. We'd love to see that, and we'll give you guys a shout out. Let's we'll drop away our title banner here, and let's see what we've got for visitors today. How are things going for you, Alicia?
Pretty good. It's a little bit of an interesting time with all the changes on study permits. So we thought we'd mention that too once we do some shout outs. But yeah, there's changes in the air with the whole study permit program and a little bit of new announcements with respect to the postgrad work permit extension. Well, the ability to have a 3-year postgrad work permit for only certain types of programs, which was kind of the one silver lining in that whole announcement.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Like, we would call it a silver lining because much of the announcement was not super positive for people who are involved in the world of international students. And so it's, yeah, some of the changes needed, well, some change needed to happen. Whether or not we actually needed to see what the government did, well, I'm not here to speculate on that, only help people understand what this means for them. But for sure, there's a lot of disappointed people, a lot of frustrated people, but I think they had to do something. So I guess we'll see how it plays out here, if what they're doing has the impact that they hope it will. That's the theory. All right, let's see. We've got Marlene. Hello, Marlene. Great to have you connecting in. If Tech, back again. Mark and Alicia. Yes, Marlene says French is on the rise. Absolutely it is. And that's probably a good segue, isn't it, Alicia, to slide over and just take a peek at what we've got going on here. So let's adjust our screen here and we'll pull this up. And if you have not been hiding under a rock, you will know that there was once again another round of invitations. And once again on February the 1st, 7,000 invitations to apply were extended to Francophone only, French language, individuals with French language proficiency, and that's it. And if, as always, people are looking, well, how much? You know, what is the level that I need to be able to hit? And when we're going through this, few people actually pull this up, but this is the actual ministerial instructions associated with this round of invitations. And so you can see here. So French language, so specifically, this is one of the categories that have been designated, okay? And if you don't have French, then you're not going to get through this draw. So then it says, okay, to be a member of this category, you have to have French at a level 7 or higher in all language skill areas. So, you know, we talk a lot about CLB 9 with English, but the reality is for this, it's a 7. It's a level 7. So if you can hit that and you can demonstrate that you have that ability in all of those abilities, then you have a legitimate shot at getting this invitation to apply. And are you surprised that it dropped down all the way to 365, Alicia, for the CRS?
Yeah, I mean, French really is the golden ticket. 365, like there's almost nothing else that you could have a CRS of 365. And the tie-breaking rule goes all the way back to September of last year. So if you had a profile sitting in the pool and you had a CRS of 365, and if you had exactly 365, they will all the way scoop out of that pool back to September 8th of 2023. So if you're wondering, hey, why didn't I get my invitation to apply? Well, if your profile was created after September 8th of 2023 and you still had that 365, you lost out for the tie-breaking rule. So this is just another kind of instance of making sure that you have your profiles valid, they're up to date, and if you get those NCLC level 7s on your TEF or your TCF exam, make sure to update your profile, because now it's starting to matter again on that tie-breaking rule.
Yes. And when they do a round that's kind of an even number like this, 7,000, it typically means that there will be a cutoff and that the tie-breaking rule will kick in. So, like Alicia said, if anyone who had submitted a profile after September 8th of last year, um, even if they had 365, wouldn't have been drawn. And if you see kind of an uneven number here, then sometimes that means they're scooping out everyone based on the actual score that they had. So, or in some cases they're scooping out everyone, right? Like in most cases, provincial nominee draws, there isn't an individual that is left behind if they've got a PNP nomination with those PNP only draws. Let's take a look at just the rounds of invitations, and just, yeah, identify a couple things. So like I said, if we go back here, when was the last PNP? So you can see here 1,548 were extended with a minimum score of 776. That pretty much means that the lowest CRS within that group, like there probably wasn't anyone within that had a provincial nomination for express entry that didn't get drawn here. But each of these even numbers, the tiebreaker really does tend to kick in. So where do you see this going, Alicia?
Yeah, I mean, so the last general draw was at the very end of January, 541. It's really high still. That is really high. It is very difficult to get a CRS score of 541 on a general draw. And so it just seems to me that if you happen to be under one of those category specific occupations and you meet all the normal requirements for either CEC or FSW, or I guess FST, and you can fit one of those categories, then you have the best chance. If not, those general draws, the CRS scores are through the roof right now.
They sure are. And there's been other changes as well, hasn't there?
Mhm.
We know just recently in the world of international students and post-grad work permit holders and spousal open work permits, there's change and more change to come.
Mhm. So one thing that the government just announced on Monday, so February 5th, well, we did talk a while ago about the big announcement that the minister had made, but now they're providing a little bit more detail. So these are kind of hot off the press interpretive guidelines on what is happening here with the caps and the provincial attestation letters. So keep in mind, everything came to a screeching halt on January 22nd when they said, basically, if you don't have a provincial attestation letter, you can't submit a study permit application. It'll get returned to you. And so this now is this in-between period while all the provinces are trying to figure out what is their cap, what's the allocation, how are they going to divvy that up amongst the universities and post-secondary institutions that are designated learning institutions within their province. And these letters have to accompany anybody's application for a study permit. There are only a few exemptions or exceptions if you are a minor and you are going to non-post-secondary, or if you happen to be doing a PhD or a master's program, but everybody else needs these attestation letters. The provinces haven't necessarily created a system yet. And so they have been told to have a system in place by March 31st, 2024. But right now we're in this very strange in-between area where students effectively are not going to be able to submit their applications for study permits until each of the provinces or the province that they want to go to has their attestation letter process in place.
You can see here with all of these changes, I was actually going to jump on and kind of break this down. I think there's been so much coverage of this topic. I'm not going to at this stage. But yeah, it's interesting to see how this is going to play out. And one of the things I think a lot of us, Alicia, were really surprised at is their decision to remove a spousal open work permit from international students that are not masters or PhD. And I think that's going to have a fairly high impact on many candidates who are looking to come that have families. And when you look at the increase in the tuition requirements and increase in the funds that are required to study in Canada now, as of, I guess that kicked in January, I believe, it's going to be a lot more difficult. And, studying internationally will, more so than ever before, become an elite kind of a thing, to be able to have that much money to be able to study internationally in Canada. And I just wonder how it's going to play out. It'll be very interesting to see what impact, if any, it has on um, the numbers of people studying in Canada, and even within our education system that relies so much right now on international students. And it'll be interesting to see if the governments decide to increase funding to the colleges and universities, or whether the Canadian and permanent resident students, will just simply have to see their tuition rise for school. But I don't know
Yeah.
if you've heard anything, or if you have any thoughts on that, Alicia.
Well, I I think it's extremely hard that they are taking away the ability for spouses to get that open spousal work permit. And so this is their interpretive guideline here because it's going to really make it difficult for families. If you happen to be married and you want to come study in Canada, it's going to be much harder. Basically, your spouse has to independently qualify for a work permit or be able to get their own study permit, which I think would be prohibitively expensive, or hopefully they could find a Canadian employer who would be able to support them with an LMIA, but that's also difficult. I do want to mention, Mark, if you go up
Mm-hmm.
to point
Yep.
2, the one thing that they have announced that's time sensitive. So there will be a subset of people. I know I have one client in this situation who is currently completing a master's degree and is trying to figure out, because their letter of completion will be coming out within the next month or so. They're trying to figure out, well, when do they apply for a postgrad work permit? Is their program now, even though it was less than 2 years, it is a full master's program, are they going to be eligible for this new extended 3-year PGWP? So it used to be the case that all of the time, the length of your program of studies, as long as it was 8 months, is tied to the length of your PGWP. So if you had 8 months, you get 8 months. If you had a year, you get a year. If you get 2 years of programs of studies, then magically you get 3 years on your postgrad, which is a big deal. Starting on February 15th now, 2024, they said that if you were in a master's degree level program that is less than 2 years, but you meet all the other PGWP eligibility criteria, then a 3-year postgrad work permit will now be available to these people as well. So if this is your situation, you're currently working on a master's program, it was an accelerated master's or some sort of professional master's that took less than 2 years, hold off. Don't submit your postgrad work permit application yet, unless you absolutely have to because you're running out of status or your study permit is otherwise expiring. Um, so be careful with that. But if you can, wait until February 15th, because then instead of getting a 1-year postgrad work permit, you should hopefully be able to get 3. And I would specifically take a screenshot of this and include it with your application if this is your scenario.
And one other relative uncertainty we have is if individuals who have already obtained a postgrad work permit for a master's program of less than 2 years, whether or not they will allow them to then recapture or acquire the additional time that they may not have otherwise been eligible for. And there hasn't,
Mhm.
to my extent, I haven't seen any clarification on that. If their purpose is to encourage more masters and PhDs, to come to Canada and to study and to remain, which really a 3-year postgrad work permit, that's still the end goal. Otherwise, you would do what the US does, which is a 1-year OPT, and then unless you can find the equivalent of an LMIA, off you go home, right? And so the 3 years implies to me that they want individuals to be able to qualify and be eligible for PR. And I think they've actually stated that in some of the information circulars. And so if this is the priority, yeah, I would like to see that they would allow for individuals to apply, and maybe it's via paper. When you're trying to recapture any time, that's the process that they have in place right now. But maybe there might be a possibility. Have you seen anything, Alicia, on that front?
I saw in the listserv that some of our other colleagues across the country have sent in messages to
Mm-hmm.
MREPs, and we're waiting to stay tuned
Waiting.
on that.
Yep. And the other thing we were a little bit nervous about too, that was clarified here, is whether or not someone who had obtained a 2-year credential, right, in post-secondary education, whether or not they would continue to benefit from the maximum 3 years. And so we were concerned that maybe they were going, if you weren't a master's or PhD, that somehow they might reduce it down to only be the length of your study. And I think that's been now clarified that if you do, do a bachelor's degree or you do some program of 2 years, you can still, depending upon, the school that's a DLI and it's eligible for postgrads, that you still can get the 3 years. I think that's been clarified. So
Yeah, and the only difficulty, of course, is if you scroll down to section 3. This is where some colleges
yeah,
you might lose the ability to get that postgrad work permit, but
completely.
that's
Yeah,
only if it's in these public-private partnership situations. So
yeah, yeah.
take a look at these
And
rules.
I don't believe, Alicia, that Alberta has these. I was looking to try to see, okay, well, which schools, which programs would potentially be caught by this? But I don't believe, and this is another thing that I want to point out, education is a provincial matter, at least with respect to the division of powers, within our constitution. And so it's important for people to realize that, Ontario, 50% of the students going to Ontario, Ontario makes the rules for those schools, including who the DLIs are. And obviously IRCC wasn't terribly happy with how that whole market had expanded. And this was in particular one of the arrangements that they felt had resulted in, well, you can see here, just the quality of education. They had some concerns that were raised, about that. And, you can't speak for all of them, but clearly some of them, the minister, I remember, Minister Miller had indicated in one of his press conferences right here that he described a school that was located above, what was it? Is it I can't remember, like a store or a bakery or something. I can't remember. And it didn't even exist. And the students were driving Uber. And he said, well, if I wanted to create a special program for Uber drivers, I could do that. But this isn't what the international student program is designed for. So clearly there's some pretty egregious examples of abuse within the issuance of DLIs, but these schools got DLI recognition, and that's how individuals were able to to come through, and in many cases, students may not even have known that everything was kind of a sham until they got here. And then what do, right? And they say, oh, well, we'll
Yeah,
just grant you your diploma. Here you go. Congratulations. Now you can get your post-grad work permit, and it's only going to cost you $35,000, right? So,
and so what they did here was they said they're taking that away. But
mhm.
a lot of people were probably pretty darn worried about when they were taking that
Yes.
away. And so they are specifying here that if you are currently an international student and you are
Mm-hmm.
in one of these public-private partnership
Yep.
colleges, and you're completing your program and you're following all the rules as they existed when you signed up and got your study permit, you will still be eligible for that PGWP. I don't know how long that's going to be in
Yep.
force, right? But it does say that new students who are currently or starting to enroll in this type of program will not be eligible for a postgrad work permit. And so, Mark, I don't know, we can't emphasize this enough.
Yeah.
If you are abroad and somebody is trying to tell you they're going to sell you this ability to get this study permit or charge you money to help
Yeah.
you apply for a study permit at a public private college partnership, it is so important that you know you will not be able to get a work permit after completing those programs of studies. So be super, super careful here.
And I want to show you guys one other thing, especially if you're outside of Canada and you are trying to figure out, well, how the heck do I know if it's a public-private partnership? Oops, I did the wrong one here. DLI. See. How do I know if it's a public-private partnership? How am I supposed to understand how this all works? Well, the reality is you really don't, because there's an easy way for you to determine if your school is truly authorized to issue postgrad work permits. And you can search for it right here on this list. So and obviously we know Ontario has these, you can go here and you can see. So there are certain colleges that may be a designated learning institution, um, but it indicates right here, you can see whether or not it offers, and let me just slide this over a bit, whether or not it offers postgrad work permit. And so it's pretty simple. If it says no here, I don't know in what world you'd want to come and study at this school, unless, of course, you truly just wanted to get the education and then go home, which may be the case. Um, but take that into consideration. And so you can see here how many of these now, Alicia, It's kind of crazy. Like when you're looking at this, now they're all no, 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 no. Some have, if you see a yes here, you guys, there's details, which usually means that the particular program, there's only certain things. And you can see here, you're eligible for postgrad if you complete one of the degrees below. And it's a master's or a doctorate. And so you're not eligible if you complete any other program at this school. So it's quite interesting. So read the fine print. There's no excuse now for individuals not to know what really whether a postgrad is eligible or not. You can go to the list and look if you have any concerns. And I think generally speaking, Alicia, anyone who's looking to study at one of these public-private partnerships, I think January the 22nd, when this was instituted, I think this is probably the cutoff day, I have to assume, when the announcement was made. Now anything's possible, but I have to assume that if you have not come or your permit has not been approved, before this date, I have to assume that probably you're not gonna see a eligibility for a postgrad work permit. But we still have these PALs, right? And those provincial attestation letters, I don't know. They're still trying to sort it out with Quebec. We don't know fully how fast the provinces are going to have this process turned around, but it's an artificial delay, possibly all the way to March 31st, unless a province says, "Oh, we've got ours sorted out." So they have until March 31st to sort that out, right? Interesting times. We will see how this all plays out. All right, let's have a few more shout outs here. Hardeep says, "Welcome back, Mike and Alicia." People call me a lot of things, and Mike is probably one of the more common ones. Let's see who else we have here that we can say hello to. We've got Marco as well over in Ontario. Alexis says hello from No Snow, Ontario. No Snow, Toronto. Well, do you have snow up there in Calgary, Alicia? We have snow down
We
here.
do. We have a little bit, and we have such low snowpack here that I really am hoping for more snow. I think it's pretty worrisome about the drought levels in Alberta, so I welcome the snow. Bring on the snow.
Yes. And this is perfect. Amir says, "Is it just me or your voice level is a bit low?" It is. And it's about time for me to get a new mic, I think, you guys. So I'm gonna just raise up the mic here so that it's right in the screen, and then I think that's the issue. So now we got it sorted out. I don't like to stick my mic right in the camera, but let's see if we can do. Okay, we'll just zoom this in a little bit here. There, I think that'll work. I just got to get a little bit closer here. Okay, we'll roll with that. All right, let's see who else we have here. But thanks, I appreciate the feedback. Okay, let's keep zipping through here, and let's see if there's any other shout outs. I think we're going to dive into do some deep dive into oh my goodness. Okay, I can't help myself here. Queen Burger here. This is a reality, Alicia. So Punjabi men have found new way to fulfill foreign dreams, contract marriages. India's ideal bride is proficient in English. Yeah, I've seen the ads. And anytime there's a good program, I swear, then there's abuse that comes in that causes these good programs to fall apart. And take, for instance, the owner-operator LMIA process. Well, when individuals were struggling to be able to get through express entry, one of the paths they used initially were these owner-operators. So come buy into a business, you can get an LMIA, and I think even at that stage, if you set it up properly, you could still get the extra job offer points. But even then, if you didn't, you'd still get the work experience points as long as you could establish that you truly were employed with T4s and all those indicia of an employee-employer relationship with the company. So that owner-operator LMIA did not require advertisements because you were investing, $200,000 to buy a business. And we used those quite a bit. But then there was abuse and people took advantage of it. And, and there's lots of scammers and cheaters out there. And so anytime you've got, because really what you're talking about here, Queen Bugger, I guess, is really marriages of, there's arranged marriages obviously in India, but they're not always genuine, right? And sometimes it's difficult to tell, is this a genuine relationship and a genuine match that's the parents are all in and trying to find the right long-term happiness for their children? Or is it, oh, let's find somebody who already has a good potential of immigrating to Canada, and then all we want you to do is marry them long enough to come to Canada and then get divorced? Well, those marriages of convenience have existed for as long as the programs have existed, and they've existed for countries all over the world. So anyone who's looking to come who is not necessarily keen on following the rules, we've seen these types of situations. But I can't remember. I think it was had to have been Raj, a tweet from Raj Sharma. He said, we're going to probably see an increase in divorces in Canada here after this latest announcement. And so, yeah, it's an interesting world that we're in. Very, very interesting. All right.
Yeah, and I'll just pitch in a little commentary
Mm-hmm.
there on a marriage of convenience. So if you are looking to sponsor somebody, or if you are in a situation where you want to, sponsor your spouse in order to get your permanent residence in Canada, immigration officers will be looking at Section 4 and if this is a genuine relationship or not. And the definition of whether it's a genuine relationship includes if at the time of entering into that relationship, that wedding was for immigration purposes, it is never going to be a genuine relationship. Even if at the time you entered into it for immigration purposes, but then you decided you loved each other and you had kids together and you really wanted to make it work forever and you end up coming to Canada, if at the time you entered into that relationship in the first place, it was for immigration purposes, you're done. It doesn't matter if it's subsequently genuine. It's going to be found to be a marriage of convenience. So be super, super careful. It's just so important to be honest with yourself and with immigration and make sure that you are only sponsoring people where it's a legitimate relationship.
Absolutely. All right, let's jump into some questions here. So we'll just open this up. So Marco says, I received an NOI from Ontario. Can I make changes to my work history on my Express Entry profile? Changes that will not impact my CRS and will not change my eligibility criteria. Thanks.
So, Marco, we often work with people who are in this process, right? They are working for their provincial nominee, and then they also have an Express Entry profile in the works. And I always say to tread with caution because it is important that we understand why you're doing what you're doing and that you explain to everybody why you're doing what you're doing. So everybody has a record of what used to be in your profile and what you had in your registration or your notification of interest forms. So if you are changing things and you understand that it's not going to impact your CRS and you have a good reason for why you're doing what you're doing and you know that it's not changing your eligibility criteria, you might be able to do that. But I would still recommend that you put a letter of explanation to outline what changes were made and why.
All right, next question is from Marlene. And Marlene says, my employer submitted an LMI exempt offer of employment under NOC whatever X, and my closed work permit was approved at the POE by CBSA. Can I be sure the same NOC X will be accepted later for Express Entry PR? This is a great question, Marlene. Great question.
Mhm. And
I can
so,
maybe, oh, go ahead, Alicia. I was going to say I could tackle this one with some real life examples, but I had a client who came and big immigration firm had done the work permit, but at the end of the day, they hadn't really looked carefully at what the person was doing as far as duties. They just went with the title and the other 500 work permits they'd probably done for this IT company. And in reality, the work permit that the person had under the International Mobility Program, so LMI exempt offer, maybe it was an intercompany transfer, I can't remember, the duties didn't line up with the NOC code on that work permit. And it was going to be a big issue because you have two problems. One, are you working outside the confines of your work permit? That's one. And two, when the time comes for express entry, what do you put down? Because if you say, oh no, my NOC code is actually this, but the work permit says a different NOC code, well, it's going to be a problem. So, yeah, and you can never be sure, Marlene, that it's going to be accepted because it comes down to the reference letter that you provide within your express entry application. What do those duties specifically state? And do those duties align with the NOC code that you have chosen? Whether it's your primary NOC or it's one of the other NOCs that you're including in your work history. So it's something that you need to be alert and attentive to And in many cases, you, Marlene, have no control over the issuance of that work permit. But if you're listening and you're in a situation where you're looking at transferring to Canada, take the time to ask the questions and make sure that you truly do have the right NOC selected. So try to take as much ownership as you can, because if PR is your goal, it does need to line up.
Yeah, and I would say too, there are some categories of LMIA exempt job offers that are not going to make you eligible for express entry. There are some low-skilled job offers that you are not going to be eligible for express entry with. And so be really careful. When Mark and I work with our clients that are employers, we always make sure to figure out what is the long-term goal for the company and for the employee. And if it's permanent residence, then be really careful in terms of what the company is providing up front for their letter of recommendation, their job offer, their job duties descriptions, their wages, hours of work, because also remember it has to be at least 30 hours to be counted as full time. And all of that, if it, like Mark was saying, if you say one thing on the work permit and then all of a sudden you try to claim something different when you go for your express entry, either you guys are lying on the work permit or potentially offside and breaching your conditions, or it's not going to hold up on the express entry PR side. So everything should match ideally in a perfect world. But do go through and take a look at not only the lead statement, so that opening paragraph of the NOC, but also the bullet points. If there are two subsets within the NOC that you have, like if it says technologists do this and we have another subset within it, then you can actually only need to do 75% of the bullet points within the subset. So keep that in mind when you're looking at the job duties also.
Yes. Okay. Pavneet says, does our experience on implied status count towards CECRP&P eligibility?
So this is a little bit fraught with a few what ifs. So it depends on when you were working on implied status and what your other status was. And so there are specific rules when you're transitioning from a study permit to a postgrad work permit. So I saw another question in the chat too about people asking about, can they work part-time during gaps in studies and will that count towards express entry? No, it will not. So there are rules for when somebody on a study permit can work and when they can work full time. But that doesn't mean that it's going to make you eligible for express entry Canadian experience points. If you have completed your program of study and you get your letter, you have to stop working right away. But the moment that you submit your postgrad work permit eligible application, as long as you are eligible, you should be able to use that implied status for work permit or work Canadian work experience, usually. There are some circumstances where you're switching from a work permit to a different work permit, so you weren't a student at all. And as long as you can prove that you met the requirements for implied status and that you did not leave the country and you continued to work under the same conditions that you were authorized to work on your original work permit, you should be able to prove that that's a continuous period of Canadian high-skilled work. But make sure that you've got your documents in order and you've kept proof of when you submitted your application, you stay inside Canada, and you continue to work for the same employer under the same conditions.
Excellent. Great question. Great question. Okay, next one here. This one's from Spider-Man. He says, if someone loses implied status when inside of Canada, example, by withdrawing a pending work permit application, what would be their status after that time in Canada? Is a visitor record application must be submitted?
So, Spider-Man, be aware that if you no longer had work permit authorization, so if it's expired, then your status is likely expired. And so probably you're going to have to do a restoration application. So if your work permit expired, you had a pending work permit application, but you withdrew it, if you don't also have another visitor record, and most people don't, so if they've been on a work permit, they usually only have that work permit. If you're from a visa required country, of course, you need a visa to enter into, well, not to exit, but you need a visa to enter Canada again. But a visitor record is going to be the application that you do to change your status from a worker to a visitor. You can't work, of course, but you also would have to do a restoration application and pay that extra $200 and some restoration fee to accompany that visitor record extension. So be really careful with this, because technically you're out of status and they could remove you in the meantime.
This one is an express entry one, Alicia, that I want to bring up for a very, very specific reason. And I want to actually promote my course again. Supreet says, my name is Supreet. We have received a refusal on our PR application stating that the NOC code does not match with the experiences. Will reconsideration help with giving evidences, job letter, etc.? So just to clarify, you guys, when you click submit on your express entry application, your EAPR, the information that you've provided then becomes the substance from which the officer will make a decision. And when it comes to a determination that your NOC doesn't match, it's largely because you have not provided evidence to show that you performed a substantial number of the duties for that NOC code you've selected. And often we see this a problem when reference letters are simply not comprehensive enough. And within the express entry course, and I just want to share this with you guys, right now the cart's closed, but I'm expecting to open it kind of mid-February. We're the 7th today, so probably around the 20th. I've got some surgery actually, Alicia, 26th, that I was notified I'm going to be going in for a little hernia, which has been a royal pain. And then Jessica's wedding is on the 17th. So we're going to have a busy February. So right around that week of the 20th, we're going to open up this card again. But in here, I'm going to open up the actual course. So in this Express Entry Accelerator here, that's been rebranded, there's like 68 lessons and growing because we're constantly adding new ones. But in module 4, so you can see there's an introduction module, eligibility, how to complete the profile, then getting your ITA and submitting your EAPR. In this EAPR, obviously work history is one of the most important parts of your whole application. And it, as Supreet can see here, can make or break your application. So I created a separate module, module 6, that has specific lessons on every single document that you need to upload. And within here, within this lesson right here, I have a ton of sample reference letters so that you can see these were all reference letters that were successful with previous individuals. But even then, we don't care what the letter looks like. It's what is inside the letter. And so we've got a record of employment instruction that you can give to your employer. We have a record of employment checklist, and I'm just going to open this up right now. And within the checklist, let's see if it will allow me to view it here. I think yes. So I'll just share this little sneak peek. So this record of employment checklist, I have these here for a reason. And if a NOC code is not matched up, it's because the job duties and responsibilities that you've listed are just not, they're not sufficient. And sometimes officers can make mistakes. They can. And so you asked, well, should I request reconsideration? Well, if we submitted your application, I can tell you, and it got rejected because they felt the NOC code wasn't right, we'd be requesting reconsideration because we don't take this lightly and we would have felt that it was accurate. But sometimes technical language in reference letters can be confusing for officers. Sometimes they don't make the same connections with the way your duty is described in your letter with the way it's described in the NOC code. And so that's why we created something we call our NOC selection tool, which is this tool is designed to help you literally lay out your duties and the NOC code. And it's interesting, Alicia, I've now seen a bunch of other representatives out there that are using the similar kind of strategy. But the goal is to make it as easy as possible for the officer to know and understand that your duties match up, and you literally lay it out for them. And there's lessons on letters of explanation, how to describe it, especially in the context of the most important part of your application, I feel, which is the record of employment section. So keep that in mind and know that when an officer makes a determination, you don't have an opportunity to add new evidence. You don't. So a reconsideration isn't, hey, oh yeah, I should have included that. Here, now I have it ready for you. No, that's not how it works. And so the consequences of getting an application like this rejected can be devastating, right, Supreet? And we've
Yeah.
looked at this with the CRS scores being what they are. You may only have one shot. Let's say, for instance, I'll use as an example, all of you 7,000 invitation ITA receivers who had French language. Let's say you're the one that had 365. What's the likelihood they're going to do another 7,000 this year? Maybe, I guess that'd be freaking insane, but maybe they would do that. But you have one shot. And often it is one chance, and you don't get a second chance at this. And we've had lots
And
of
Mark,
consults. Yeah,
I want to jump in with a horror story consult story.
please.
Um, and so somebody got an invitation to apply. They were under the healthcare draw. They thought they were golden. They did the application on their own. They had worked in various countries around the world. And they said, hey, I had my police certificate. I got it from country X. I used it when I came to Europe. It was fine. I used it when I did my nursing accreditation and got my nursing designation. It was fine. I used it when I went to try to apply for my US visa. It was fine. I submitted it with my PR application under Express Entry, and I didn't even think twice. I didn't even consider that there could be an issue with that police certificate. But guess what? That police certificate was issued a week before this person left that
Left.
foreign country. A
Yeah.
week. It was 7 days.
Yeah.
And their entire Express Entry application gets rejected as incomplete because that police certificate was issued 7 days before they left the country. They used it subsequently for a whole bunch of different purposes, and it never occurred to them that that would not be okay for Express Entry. But this is where going back and checking that completeness check and being absolutely sure that the things that you don't even stop to question, making sure those are correct. And that's where we spend a lot of our time is really cross-checking and cross-examining everything so that you don't end up in those heartbreaking situations.
Exactly. And I'll just flip back and just help people to understand. In addition to the course that I have, as a firm, we also have this direct lawyer to client collaboration. So Alicia and I don't use assistants or paralegals or consultants to work with you. We work directly with you, and admittedly, it's not the most profitable model, but it allows Alicia and I and you to sleep well at night, because together, when we put our heads together and really do a comprehensive examination of, really a forensic examination of your application, all the documents, all the information before it's submitted, it we know that we've done things properly, and it's really made made my evenings a lot nicer than the days when I was using more assistants or paralegals who may not have had the same level of knowledge that I had, may not have had the same level of, attention to detail, which is so critical because, like Alicia pointed out, the reasons for refusal are rarely big things. And I guess Supreet's is a big thing, because getting your knock wrong is a big thing, and that happens a lot. But just as often, it's something so innocuous that you don't even realize. And if we jump back to my course, that's why I have a specific lesson on police certificates. And, within here, I have a whole bunch of samples, and I'm constantly updating these things. So sample police certificates, so you have an idea of what they look like, and a ton of information. And there's a reason that this video alone is 25 minutes long, right? And so, because these things, which most people would just assume it's not a big deal, and everything you watch out in internet land tells you, oh, it's so fine and don't worry about it, and it's, I got mine approved with this, is horrifically dangerous, because it lulls you into a sense of security when really there's something that's wrong and you just don't know. So Supreet, my heart breaks for you. If you truly feel like your knock code was correct and that you can clearly demonstrate that it did match, I have in the past had success pointing this out to an officer that they were wrong in a reconsideration request, and they did approve. But it is extremely rare for that to happen. Sometimes they don't even hardly even consider the reconsideration request. And the alternative, if you're 100% correct that you've got everything right and the officer made a mistake, is a leave application for judicial review, which is also a very expensive process. And for some of you, for example, if we go back to the situation of the last francophone draw, and if you did have 365 points, well, maybe in those situations you need to do everything you can to try to fight. But understand, if the officer was correct, you can't add new evidence, like new correcting errors in the job letter, adding duties, and say, oh no, actually I did do this. It won't work. It won't work.
So, Supreet, I will jump in and say to book a consult, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it will be useful for Mark and I to take a look at what you claim the knock to be, what you think, the evidence was that you submitted, and then what the officer is saying the knock should be or why it's deficient. Because if you do want to do a judicial review application, there are very strict timelines, and you've got to make sure that you put in that leave application with a lawyer before you meet your deadline. So it's 15 days if it's an in-Canada decision. So you don't have a lot of time. If you are looking at doing reconsideration, you could do those two things at the same time, a leave application plus a reconsideration request. If we look at it and we say, no, you know what, you just didn't have solid enough evidence, you got to restart, at least you'll know that professionally we would recommend that you restart or that you fight it and that there might be enough evidence to go for it, and at least you can understand the risks.
Yes, exactly. And for those of you, now is actually probably a good time to reserve your spot. So all you need to do is, there's a link in the description below. Go here to our landing page and just click on get notified, and you can leave your name and email, and we'll, as soon as the cart opens up again, then we'll do it. And remember, with this course, you guys, you have a, within the course, there is a masterclass, and we always do this, always. So not only is there, how many do we have here? Like 64 individual lessons for Express Entry Accelerator. I can't remember how many there are, 68, I guess there are now. Not only do we have all of these on demand, you can start reviewing them right now, the content, but we have a series of master classes, 1 hour each evening. And I think we're going to reduce it down to 3 hours this time, just because by the time I get through 2, and because this course is so comprehensive, I'm finding that I'm mostly just sharing pictures of my family in the last holiday, out into the mountains behind our house here I went on. So we're probably going to drop it down to 3. Usually it's a Monday through Wednesday, and 1 hour, and it's your opportunity to ask any questions that you want. And if you're not able to make it, we have a community group that's associated with this where you can post your questions, and every single question gets answered. So that's the Express Entry Accelerator. So you can just drop your name and your email address, and you'll get notified as soon as we launch it, which I think will probably get something out there either today or tomorrow about the next masterclass. But oh my goodness, you guys, the consequences, they are just so severe. And the slightest little thing, and you go online, and there are so many people out there that all you hear is, oh, it's so easy, and they make you feel stupid, like, well, I don't quite know what to do, but everybody makes it sound like it's so easy. And so you start to second guess yourself. Well, Alicia and I can tell you, we don't get consults from people that everything is roses. We get consults from people who there's been a problem with their applications. And with solicitor client privilege, we don't share what we talk about with our clients, personal information. We don't talk about 1/10 of what we see every week when people book consults. And how many times now we have to tell people, you don't get a second chance. And it's really tough when you've made so many years and spent so many thousands of dollars to get to this point, all because some WhatsApp group said it's so easy, you don't need to hire someone to help you. Well, we'll leave it at that.
But we do try to share our insights and nuggets of information and,
Yeah.
stories without having any personally
Yeah.
identifying characteristics. So we try to help so that you guys don't make the same mistakes. One thing I do want to pull out,
Mm-hmm.
Mark, was Vida Mia Rabena had made a comment on there about the rural renewal stream and postgrad work permit expiring. And Vida, I just want to say, be very careful about this. Alberta is pretty much merciless with expiring work permit status. So just because you've submitted a rural renewal stream application under Alberta PNP programs does not mean that you can continue to be eligible if you fall out of status on your work permit. And if you're on a PGWP, you can't extend a PGWP. You can maybe do a recapture of time if the only reason that PGWP was issued was because your passport was expiring early. But otherwise, basically you're probably in a situation, where you need to find a employer who's going to go through that LMIA process right away so that you are able to switch over to an employer specific work permit before your PGWP expires in May. So please, please, please have your employer reach out. They can book a consult and we can walk them through what they need to do for an LMIA. But it's not a simple matter of just extending a PGWP. You can't usually do that. So make sure that you still have status under a work permit.
Perfect. All right. Just pulling up something on YouTube here. One of the things that within our channel, I think a lot of people know we have these little super chats, and sometimes people post things, and I'm just trying to figure out, okay, I'm going to take a little picture of it because Sky, Gabrielle, I think we answered Sky's question, and then she had posted this little thing here. I'm just going to pull it right over our screen here. So, and the description, oh, there we go. We'll stop this here. Stop there. Okay. Yeah, she just posted that. So I just wanted to give her a little shout out. And it's always funny because when with our software that I use to bring up the comments and everything, so if we have this here and then I bring up the actual how it's displayed, this is so funny. It says super sticker from Sky. Shiba dog raises and lowers his index finger to get noticed. So that's what I see. And then this is what everybody on YouTube sees. So shout out to Sky. That's kind of fun. All right, let's keep cruising along here. We do have a bunch more questions, and these questions are really good today. And it's allowed us to I think sometimes we touch on so many different areas of immigration. We don't have a great opportunity to really drill down deep. And part of the reason we do this, well, there's two purposes. One is we want to genuinely give back. So Alicia and I are not in this because we want to be millionaires. That's kind of really funny, actually, comical. We're here as much to help and feel like we can make a difference in the world as it is to, of course, help provide for our families. And in the process of doing this, we want to show people, hey, we know what we're doing. There's so many perceived experts out there, whether they say they're experts or not. You have no way of knowing who knows what they're talking about and who doesn't. You've got fancy websites with just amazing graphics and, the user experience is so appealing and it's just, or you've got other companies that produce lots of news reports or, they're the very first to say what the minister, to post what the minister has said. And for sure, I like to try to do that. But the reason we do this is to showcase, Alicia and our knowledge and to just through the process of giving back, build a relationship with you guys and a relationship of trust, because there's so many things out there clamoring for your hard-earned dollar, especially when it comes to immigration and so many people offering all kinds of things to you. And our hope is that by doing these live Q&As that you guys will realize, I need some help. So I'm going to reach out to Mark and Alicia. I'm going to book a consult with them and maybe retain them to help me. Or someone else that's struggling with their applications. And the one thanks more than anything else that we appreciate is when people refer someone to us or they themselves choose to connect to us. And in many cases, a consult can resolve a lot of issues. And when you book it really in advance, before the problems arise, it's a lot easier for Alicia and I to direct you in the right path. However, when it's something like Sheba experienced there with getting a refusal, it's really, really hard for us sometimes to fix. And I remember, Alicia, when we started practice, over 20 years ago or however long it is now, when we started, I don't think there was a situation I couldn't fix because there was always an officer you could talk to. There was much more discretion. And, when people made mistakes, the officers would send them a request letter for whatever document that they were missing. They would literally help them to make sure the application was complete. They wouldn't necessarily just refuse it or reject it. And we weren't in a world of ITAs or comprehensive ranking systems. We were in a situation where if you met the eligibility requirements, you could be assured that your application would be processed. But it's all gone now. It's all expediency because you guys all want it done fast. And if you want your application processed in 5 months, your express entry versus the old minimum of 2 years. And I think 2 years was like the fastest. The way they got around it is they said, well, we're going to do a completeness check. And if we feel your application isn't complete, we're just going to return it as being incomplete. And then you're
And
back
one
in the
thing I
pool.
want to, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and one thing I want to highlight is, so my poor consult client who was heartbroken about getting their application returned as incomplete because of this police certificate issue. The letter clearly says, we're returning it because we noticed there's an error in the police certificate. We didn't even vet. We didn't even
The other
read the
stuff.
whole
Yeah.
rest of the application. So just because we're returning it for issue number 1 doesn't mean that there's issues 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, right? And so they don't have time to go through your entire application and tell you all the things that you did wrong. They just pick the first thing that they can easily return as incomplete or refuse on. And so, even if you fix that one thing, there might be other things you need to fix. So just keep that in mind. Be aware that immigration is not going to be there to hold your hand to tell you how to fix things. It's really up to you to take the initiative to do it right.
Mm-hmm. I want to point out, let's just see here, this question from Victor Hugo, maybe. He says, hope you're well. What are your thoughts on the French draws with a score of around 410? Not really sure if it's worth spending the $450 for the TEF TCF. What? Why in the world would you not spend the money with 410? As we've seen here, they just did a draw at 365 for Francophone speakers. So unless, Victor Hugo, you have a score that's like off the charts already, but of course you said you've got 410 here, the Francophone is going to be the only pathway forward unless you've got work experience in a different area or another mechanism for accumulating more CRS points. So I don't know if I'm missing something here, Alicia, but I don't know why you wouldn't increase at least the opportunity of being pulled in through one of the French language draws.
And Vic says it was difficult to reach CLB7 as a native French speaker. So yeah, it is tough, right? So those NCLC level 7s, a lot of people, even on the English tests, if you're writing IELTS or CELPIP, the written aspect of those tests is harder than people realize, even if you've been speaking English and or French your entire life. So Mark has done some fantastic podcasts in terms of helping to prepare people. So there are organizations that will help guide people and get them ready to write their French exams or their English exams and give them little tips on how to write in order to have sentence structure and present ideas and things like how to structure an email, for example. So take a look at our other content as well. If you are in a situation where you need to up your scores, language tests are the first way to try to increase your scores. And yes, $450 is expensive, but it's much more expensive to not be able to come to Canada if that's your ultimate goal.
Yes. And like I said, last fall, it's about 3 months ago now, how ironic, I did a presentation at the ACADI, the Quebec Immigration Lawyer Conference in Trois-Rivières, and on the golden age of Francophone immigration. This is just a little short that I did on YouTube. And then for CELA, like I said, in the spring, I did a part of the workshop series, their very first one, January the 18th. So just, a couple of weeks back, once again, on the golden age of Francophone immigration. And why is it the golden age? Well, let's say you don't get your 7. Okay. Well, that's fine. If you can't reach the CLB, with your French language for these additional and get this extra 50 points here, understand that notwithstanding that, there are still points if you don't hit the CLB 7. And if you go to language here, you can see that you get points for your first official language right here, but there's also points for a second official language. And so there's points up for grabs, even if you score a CLB 5 or 6. So understand, if you're the principal applicant and you're looking to get just a few more points, that 1 point could have made the difference. And if you take a look at this, maybe there was someone who was sitting at 64 here who decided to spend the $450 and maybe got 2 more points that bumped them up to 366. And they would have never thought, well, is it worth it? 365, is it absolutely worth it? And if you look at the French, let's just pull up the French. And this is why you can never guarantee. Look at this. So the lowest it had ever gotten was 375. So if you were sitting at 364, questioning whether or not to take the French test, and you say, well, it's not going to go down lower than 375. There's no way. Well, lo and behold, they do a crazy large draw, and that's what drives the points. And it's completely unpredictable. Who would have thought, let's do this for fun. I'm going to just, I love this little search feature. I remember doing a little session with IRCC, evaluating this with them, Alicia. Just the userness and, how well, it was, how easy it was to find data. They were, I don't know, they were doing some UI, UX experience kind of thing. And I remember sitting with them, but look at this. Who in the right mind, even in February during the pandemic, 2021, would have expected 27,332, right? And so when you look at this, anything is possible. And there's only been a few times where they've ever done 7,000, right? And so you can see in 2023 in March, 7,000, 7,000, 7,000, which effectively drove the scores down to 481. But, when you have that many draws in a row, then it's going to flush the scores down. But you can see how competitive it is, you guys. And this is important to note. Those of you who are sitting in your 470s and are wondering, will it ever come down to that level again, 470s? It's going to be really difficult until all of the hundreds of thousands of people that are already in Canada are kind of flushed out and they curtail or reduce the number that are here. But that's not going to happen for a number of years, because even after do the math here, this is like 21,000 in a period of 1 month, and really the 15th through the 29th. It still only pushed it down to 481. So these are some of the realities of the process. And so should you do a French test? If you can, do it. Absolutely do it.
And Mark, I wanna jump out and just send a shout out to Yunji. So if you go down, Yunji's got three comments there, and it is so important. Mark and I always emphasize honesty, right? Honesty is absolutely the only policy with immigration. And so sometimes when we talk with you and we have a consultation, we'll find out that, wait a minute, when were you working? When were you studying? What can you claim? Were you working without authorization? Were you studying without authorization? And often people don't even realize it. And so Yunji Choi says, thanks so much. And Yunji's tuning in and said, when we had consults, they realized that there were some things with their application that they hadn't properly realized. And I said, well, you've got to disclose it. You've got to come clean with it. You've got to explain it. Here are the ways that you can break it down for that immigration officer. And Yunji said they submitted their EAPR. They used my advice. They had the wrong information, but they managed to correct it. And I want to send a shout out to Yunji, and we can do a little bit of applause sound effect, because Yunji's next comment says they got their COPR. So they acknowledged their error. They didn't realize that it was an error. They came clean about it. They wrote it in their letters of explanation, and now they managed to get their confirmation of permanent residence. And so congratulations, Yunji. That's fantastic.
Excellent. All right. Well, I know we didn't get to everybody for sure, but I think we covered a lot of really good ground here. And sometimes it makes sense going back to the drawing board and just helping people understand that although on the surface it looks super straightforward, and it does, there's lots of resources, on the IRCC website, they try to lay it out, but every person's situation is just a little bit different. No two people are the same. And we've seen lots of situations where one person has relied on something they heard or saw in a group online, and they submitted their application and then got it rejected. And they can't figure it out. Why did mine get rejected when I did exactly what that other person did? Well, officers have discretion to start with. They can make their own determination based upon the information in front of them. And there's no guarantee that every single officer will make the same decision with the same set of facts. But also, officers sometimes can make mistakes, not in refusing an application, but in actually approving an application that 9 other officers out of the 10 would have rejected. And I see that happen a lot. Someone will go, they will submit an application in however they see fit based on reading the government website. And then after submitting the application, it'll get approved and they'll be like, great, I guess I did everything right. And then they'll go online, because they're the only people that do. No one goes online and says how, and kudos to anyone who comes and says, look, my application got rejected. We love you coming here and talking about it, because people don't. They just talk about how smart they are and how, oh, I did it without the help of a representative. I'm so good. And I've seen numerous times where people have booked consults where they've relied on someone who told them what to do. They followed it and got rejected. And I'll give you a classic example, Alicia. This is one of my favorite examples. We constantly tell people that you don't need to list every single work that you've ever done in your work history, because it's going to prompt you to prepare a reference letter and have to provide it when it adds nothing to your application. If the work history is not helping you with your eligibility for one of the economic programs, FSW, CEC, Federal Skilled Trade Program, or the work history is not helping to, it doesn't count towards your comprehensive ranking system, then we always tell people you don't need to list that in the work history section, but you do need to list it in your personal history section. One of the things that comes up very frequently is the fact that any external foreign work experience gets you no points if you're an accompanying spouse. So often we'll say, no, I don't have any work history that I wish to claim points for, essentially. So we'll say no. Well, somehow, and this is where, things get lost in translation, or one person tells someone else what to do. I had a couple, I can't remember what Eastern Bloc country it was, but they had some friends who were permanent residents, and they advised them that they didn't need to put work history for the spouse. And they said, because you didn't put work history in the work history section, just list your spouse as unemployed in the personal history section. So they actually misrepresented. But the thing was, the officer, whoever was adjudicating it, never thought twice about a spouse who was accompanying the principal applicant having no work history in the past 10 years. They never even thought twice about it. So when this couple did, they got a procedural fairness letter. And it said, please provide an updated background declaration form showing all your work history, because they'd done the same thing. If it worked for our friends, then of course we're going to follow them. They give us free advice. We don't have to pay anything. They wouldn't have got their application approved if they didn't do it right. So why do I need to hire someone to help me? And in their case, they came to me after they got the procedural fairness letter. What would you do? What do? You say, well, yeah, I lied because my friends told me to, or I didn't think I needed, well, I don't know how you explain saying you're unemployed when you were clearly working, right? And so what does Mark do? Well, just the same thing that Alicia would do. You need to tell them what happened. Throw yourself at their mercy and hope that you're going to have a kind officer. So that's what I advised them. They retained me to help them put together an explanation, and I never heard from them after. So I'm hoping that there was a kind officer, but sometimes it doesn't always work out that way. So, all right, we're into OT here, but thanks so much everybody for joining us today. I'm going to once again just let everybody know that we are going to open up the card again for our Express Entry Accelerator. And all of you that have gone through the process, I would hold this course up against anyone. It's 68 total lessons right now that covers every aspect of the Express Entry process. The cart isn't opened yet, but all you need to do is just go to the link in the description of wherever you're watching this, and just click get notified, and you leave your name and email address, and I'll notify you the moment we've got the cart open. But the last few master classes have been phenomenal. Just so many great questions. And the thing I love most about the master classes, Alicia, is that it's really almost like a family by the time you're through it. And there are so many times where I get comments from people that say, wow, I had no clue that I'd made that mistake until I heard the other person in the class ask that question. And so you literally learn, just like you guys are right now, from the questions that other people ask. But this is focused exclusively on express entry. And as the group gets large, we work systematically through certain areas, but it's all about getting those, it's kind of like the gravy on the mashed potatoes, getting your, some little questions that are unique to you sorted out. And yeah, I love it. And the last thing I'll just say is that we always are here to support you in whatever way you want. So it's very easy to come join us, speak to a lawyer, book a consult if you have a problem. It's way better to do it as early as possible than to come to us at the last stages when maybe it's too late for Alicia and I to help. And the only thing we can do is to advise you that you need to leave Canada, which is sad, but it happens. All right. Any last minute sign offs, Alicia?
There's
Thoughts,
good
advice?
questions in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, try to take a look at our website because I do have a blog. So Manpreet Kaur, you're asking about adding a spouse to express entry if you're in Canada together. Go back to the blog, and I have a whole blog about whether a spouse is accompanying or unaccompanying for express entry applications. So take a look at that. There are good resources all for free on our website where we're trying to provide some information here for people. So take a look at this one.
All right. Okay, everybody, we will see you again next week. And thanks for joining us. Take care.